The crew moved through the vast corridors of the warship with practiced calm boots, echoing softly against the endless metal floors as lights shifted from white to deep blue to match the cycle of artificial night and day and the silence of space. Pressed against the hull with a weight that no one spoke about yet everyone felt, the engineer watched the readouts scroll endlessly across his station, lines of data flowing like quiet rivers of numbers and symbols that only he fully understood, and he trusted those signals more than instinct, because instinct had never walked beyond the limits of the solar system before this mission, beyond the armored glass, the stars, stretched in impossible depth, bright and distant and uncaring as the ship glided forward on a path humanity had never dared to take until now, and every kilometer crossed felt like rewriting history by force of movement alone. In training they had prepared for chaos, for alarms, for fire, for impact, for screams, yet nothing had prepared them for the way silence could tighten around the chest and make every breath feel heavier and more deliberate than the last. The commander remained still in the central deck, eyes fixed on the forward projection where nothing existed but darkness and distant stars, and even that emptiness felt charged as if space itself were waiting for something to arrive. Crew members exchanged brief glances in passing, not of fear but of awareness of shared purpose and shared uncertainty, and the knowledge that no turning point in human history ever announced itself with sound. Deep inside the drive core, energy rolled in controlled storms, bright fields of power contained by precision and faith, and the engineer felt that power like a living thing beneath his hands, obedient yet immense, capable of carrying them into the pages of legend or into oblivion. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes, as time lost its meaning between the steady pulse of the engines and the slow rotation of artificial gravity, and then without warning the deepest scanners hesitated for the smallest fraction of a moment. Engineer leaned forward, reading again, checking every layer of signal, every band of detection, and there it was, not noise, not error, but absence where something should be, and in that absence he sensed the first whisper of a presence that did not belong to human space. Without raising his voice, without triggering an alarm, he transmitted the data forward, and the bridge grew still, as if every soul aboard the warship felt the same invisible hand close around the future. The ship continued forward, unwavering, carrying with it every hope, every doubt, every untold story of a world that did not yet know it was no longer alone. Alien fleet moved through their sector in perfect harmonic formation, guided by instincts older than written memory and knowledge, passed through generations of silent observation of stars that had never once betrayed them, with surprised their sensors, mapped reality with flawless precision, until the moment a region of space returned nothing, not energy, not radiation, not distortion, simply a hollow absence that logic could not explain. At first, the commanders dismissed it as an echo of cosmic interference, yet the hollow grew wider, with every passing cycle, and unease traveled through neural networks that had never learned the shape of doubt. The youngest pilots felt at first a pressure behind perception, a sense that the universe had blinked, and when it opened its eyes again, something unfamiliar was standing where nothing had stood before. Sensor arrays strained into overload, seeking reflections that should exist yet could not be found, and data streams collapsed into contradiction, and for the first time in recorded existence the fleet could not agree on what it was seeing. The shadow continued to expand, without motion, without signature, without identity, and ancient instinct whispered that predators did not always announce themselves with speed and fire, but sometimes with quiet and certainty. Command minds reached into collective awareness, searching the archives of extinction events and forgotten encounters, and every comparison failed because nothing had ever arrived without leaving a trail of warning in the fabric of space formations, slowed not by command, but by shared hesitation, as if every vessel felt the same invisible resistance pulling against forward motion, and the shadow ahead grew darker by contrast with the surrounding stars. Then the absence bent inward, and something immense began to emerge, its outline forming not as a shape of nature but of intent, layered structures. Angular mass, impossible scale, energy levels spiked across the fleet as automatic threat responses awakened without permission, and silence spread through every rank as all meaning halted in the face of what should not exist. The object continued its arrival with deliberate patience, revealing vast engines burning with contained force, not chaotic, not wild, but mastered and disciplined. In that moment, the alien consciousness encountered a new truth, that intelligence could be forged not only by evolution, but by will, by construction, by purpose. Fear took shape not as panic but as stillness, and the fleet slowed to near immobility, caught between retreat and awe, as the unknown completed its silent entrance into their reality. And, for the first time since their rise, they understood that the universe had just introduced them to another mind that did not belong to the stars. The human warship completed its emergence into full reality, with impossible calm revealing layers of armored structure stacked like the bones of a metallic giant, and light from its engines washed across the alien fleet like a rising artificial dawn. Alien pilots stared through viewing membranes as shadows of the vessel moved across their instruments, and no system could contain its full dimensions within a single frame, forcing them to piece together its size from fragments of overwhelming data. The fleet held position as if locked in invisible ice, while automated defense webs armed themselves without waiting for conscious approval, and energy levels climbed into red thresholds across every ship inside the lead command vessel. The elder minds attempted to calculate probability of survival based on every known scale of conflict, yet the presence before them destroyed all models by existing beyond acceptable parameters. The human warship did not advance, yet it did not yield, and that stillness became its most terrifying weapon, because motion could be anticipated but patience could not. Sensor echoes revealed internal movement within the vessel, thousands of life signatures moving in organized flow, and this knowledge struck deeper than any weapon signature, because it meant the object was not a machine alone but a living world wrapped in stealth. Realization spread across the fleet that this was not a scout, not a probe, not an automated guardian, but a carrier of a civilization traveling inside a single moving fortress. The alien formations attempted micro adjustments to align weapons and escape vectors, yet even the smallest shifts felt wrong, as if the warship itself bent local space into obedience. The forward observers detected no broadcast, no signal, no message, only the quiet assertion of existence, and this silence weighed heavier than a declaration of war ever could. Across the fleet, the ancient instincts warred against newly formed fear, as every vessel struggled between attack, retreat, and observation, and none of the three choices carried any promise of survival. Warship engines dimmed slightly, not as weakness but as control, as power folded inward like a creature restraining its own strength. In that gesture, the alien commander sensed not mercy and not threat but awareness, as if the massive construct before them was watching, waiting, learning. The fleet remained frozen, caught within the gaze of something that had crossed the void, not to hunt and not to hide, but simply to arrive, and arrival alone was enough to shake the foundation of everything they believed about the universe and their place within it. The engineer felt the vibration of restrained power under his boots like a living pulse, and each beat echoed through his thoughts as if the ship itself was reminding him that it was alive and listening. Across the bridge, subtle changes in posture revealed what words could not, shoulders tightening, breathing, slowing, eyes never leaving the shifting silhouettes of the alien fleet. Somewhere deep in the lower decks, a crew member paused in mid-step, sensing the silent tension without ever seeing its source, as if instinct traveled faster than sound through steel and circuitry. The commander lifted a single hand, not as an order, but as a signal of patience, and the massive ship obeyed with a gentleness that contradicted its size. Outside the viewing field's alien vessels glided in minute adjustments, like nervous thoughts forming and reforming, as if their pilots debated motion through motion alone. No weapons fired, no engines flared, no declarations were made, yet the space between the two forces felt louder than any battlefield. The crew realized in that shared stillness that the first act of this encounter was not one of fire or dominance, but of endurance. Whoever moved first would shape the story forever. So they waited on. The waiting became the most dangerous choice of all. The alien formation shifted slightly, not as retreat and not as attack, but as hesitation turning into decision, as one vessel at the front eased forward alone, separating itself from the safety of the many across. The human bridge targeting systems reacted instantly, red indicators blooming across displays as automated defense logic screamed threat faster than any voice could. The commander lifted his hand again, holding every weapon in silence as the solitary alien ship continued its slow approach, a fragile motion against the weight of two waiting armadas inside. The alien vessel, its pilot, felt the pull of countless minds watching through shared perception, each breath heavy with the understanding that return was unlikely, and yet forward motion felt unavoidable. Distance collapsed with agonizing slowness as the lone craft crossed invisible thresholds, of detection and response, and the human crew tracked every change in energy, every minor fluctuation of the unknown craft. The engineer watched patterns forming in the alien power output, not as a weapon charge but as a controlled withdrawal of strength, as if the ship was deliberately making itself vulnerable. That vulnerability traveled across the human bridge like a silent shockwave, more unsettling than aggression, because weakness required trust, and trust between unknown species was more dangerous than any missile. The alien ship reached the outer range of the human defense grid, and then power levels within it dropped, abruptly falling into near darkness, a deliberate surrender to the unknown. Human weapons remained locked without firing systems alive and waiting, yet denied their purpose by a single, unmoving hand. The lone alien pilot drifted in powerless silence, offering nothing but presence and risk as proof of intent inside the vast human warship. No one moved, no one breathed freely, no one blinked. The universe narrowed to the space between two vessels, one carrying the weight of a civilization, and the other carrying the courage of a single being. In that suspended moment, destruction felt inevitable and peace felt impossible, and yet both hovered just beyond reach, and the decision of what this meeting would become balanced on the edge of a single, unspoken choice. The alien ship remained dark and still in the vast viewing field, a silhouette against distant stars, a deliberate pause that forced every human system into alert and every mind into anticipation. Inside, the human warship crew members held their positions, frozen by training and instinct, hearts beating faster than the artificial pulse of the engines, as they measured every micro-change in the unknown vessel. The commander did not speak, did not signal, only observed, allowing the encounter to unfold in silence, knowing that any premature action could destroy more than one ship. In the alien craft, the pilot felt the same weight of expectation, the collective awareness of a fleet pressing invisibly against each thought, as if every decision mattered beyond comprehensions. Sensors detected faint fluctuations in energy, a slow rhythm, like a heartbeat pulsing from deep within the alien hull, and the engineer noted patterns that suggested consciousness, not chaos. Minutes passed, like hours, and still neither side moved, while the invisible lines of threat and caution entwined around both fleets, creating a tension heavier than any physical barrier. Then slowly, the alien vessel extended a small energy flare outward, not a weapon, not a signal in words, but a simple assertion of life and awareness, something fragile and enormous. At once the human crew recognized it immediately, a message without syntax, a choice without instruction, a presence declaring existence across the void. The bridge exhaled together, even though no one moved, the weight of decision lifting slightly, as understanding formed without discussion. In that instant, the first silent bridge between civilizations was built, not with fire, not with force, but with the courage to remain present and waiting. The human commander leaned forward, eyes fixed on the single darkened alien vessel drifting like a shadow across the stars, and felt the weight of responsibility pressing against every choice, every hesitation. The crew mirrored the tension, watching as the alien energy flare pulsed softly into space, a signal without shape or words, yet impossible to ignore. Sensors recorded every fluctuation, every minor release of power, as if the alien ship was breathing through engines and hull, and every crew member sensed a life force that was not human, but undeniably present. No one moved, weapons remained. Dormant shields held their strength in silent readiness, and the warship itself seemed to pause. In respect for the fragile declaration of awareness, the engineer whispered to himself, calculations flowing across his mind, probabilities collapsing and reforming in patterns that could not be solved by reason alone. Alone across the void, the alien pilot felt eyes on every surface, every corridor, every instrument, and understood that survival depended on patience and trust more than speed or aggression. Time stretched between the two vessels, a taut thread of tension and recognition, as the universe held its breath, waiting for the first choice that would speak louder than any weapons could. And in that silence, humanity and the unknown met for the first time. Not as enemies, but as beings measuring the weight of presence against presence. The alien vessel began to drift closer, its dark hull outlined by faint glows from distant stars, and the human crew tracked every movement, every minuscule adjustment, as if the ship itself was alive and thinking. The bridge remained still, tension thick in the air, every hand hovering near controls yet refusing action, as if fear and curiosity had merged into one inside the alien craft. The pilot felt the immense presence of the human warship as a living force pressing outward, and understood that approach itself was a message that demanded trust and patience. the engineer noted patterns in the alien energy fields, subtle shifts that indicated awareness of observation, not hostility, and reported silently. Across internal channels, the commander lifted a single hand, signaling to maintain stillness, letting the alien pilot choose the measure of distance, and intent minutes stretched into long pulses of quiet while both crews held their breath aboard vessels designed for war, yet suspended in a moment of fragile diplomacy. Then, a faint secondary glow emerged along the alien hull, a repetition of the earlier pulse, steady, rhythmic, deliberate, and unmistakably communicative. The human crew recognized it immediately, a response echoing the gesture of acknowledgement, a fragile thread reaching across the void. In that instant, the first unspoken conversation began, a dialogue of presence, intent, and trust, conducted in silence between two civilizations that had never met. The human warship held its position, engines humming softly as if breathing alongside the alien vessel, and every crew member felt the weight of the encounter pressing against their thoughts and hearts. Alien ship repeated its pulse, slowly, a pattern, deliberate and patient, signaling not aggression but recognition that it understood the human presence and accepted it. Without hostility, crossed the bridge, the commander watched monitors with unblinking eyes, every crew member frozen in awe, as the invisible thread of communication extended across the void inside the alien craft. The pilot sensed the mirror of understanding, reflecting back a truth that survival and curiosity could coexist, and that strength could be measured in restraint as much as in firepower. The engineer documented the rhythms, the fluctuations, the silent pulses, as though mapping a new language of existence, and shared it in real time across the vessel. While every human sensor absorbed the presence before them, the fleets around them waited tens of thousands of kilometers away, yet the single contact point drew attention like gravity itself, concentrating all awareness into one impossible moment. Time stretched and folded around the two ships, suspended in quiet recognition, each pulse, each minor shift a declaration that neither species sought war, yet both claimed space to wait. Finally, the alien vessel rotated slightly, aligning its main hull with the human ship in a gesture that could only be called respect, and the human commander lowered shields slowly, allowing energy fields to relax. In that moment, silence became the first agreement between civilizations, the first understanding forged without words or weapons, and the universe itself seemed to exhale. And when the warship drifted forward and the alien vessel followed, humanity learned that the first contact was not the arrival of danger but the birth of connection.